What's up, yogis? Today's video is going to be all about finding the right yoga style that's going to be best fitted for you. So I'm just going to go over all the different styles that are available at the moment and just kind of a little bit about them so that you can help make a better decision on what is going to be best fit for you. So the first that I'm going to talk about is kind of like the basis of where yoga began, and that's going to be Hatha Yoga. So Hatha Yoga is a practice that is more disciplined. It's more focused on perfecting the poses. However, it's great for beginners because the poses are held for a lot longer. So you're able to kind of get into the pose, get a feel for it, start to breathe a little, and really get all the benefits from that given pose. It's the origin of where all poses come from, so most of the yoga practice are the poses that you already know, like tree pose or like dancer. They are part of the Hatha Yoga practice. Hatha is not always the same class every time. It depends on the teacher. Some teachers teach it the same, but you can use any of the poses and kind of put them in the specific order that you'd like. You typically still do a couple sun salutations to start out your practice and get more warmed up, and you make your way down to the floor. The next practice is one of my personal favorites, and that's Vinyasa Yoga. So Vinyasa is all about connecting with the breath. Every single movement holds a breath. So as you inhale, you'll reach the arms up, or exhale, reach the arms down, whatever it may be that you're doing. Every single movement has a breath. Now, this can become more challenging. It does start to raise your heart rate as you start to move a little bit quicker, so the poses are quicker. So in that sense, it would be advanced because you're kind of moving from one pose into the next one, into the next one, into the next one, and then you end up, wherever you do. I like it because it's more of like a dance. You kind of flow into each pose rather than placing yourself into a given pose and then kind of just moving into the next. Each pose flows into the next. It's very much based around the sun salutation, and you kind of there's just more movements added into that sun salutation or taken away, whatever. It's great and it's fun because it's always a different practice. Every single teacher will teach it completely different. And a big focus in Vinyasa Yoga is Ujjayi breath. So Ujjayi is an oceanic sound. It comes up through the throat, the mouth stays closed, and it comes out the nose. But it's throat breathing through the nose, and it sounds like this. So it definitely has like a little bit of a Darth Vader feel, but when you're doing it because making the air come up a lot slower, and you're able to slow your heart rate down. The next practice is Ashtanga. Ashtanga is what I was certified in when I went to Rishikesh in India. Ashtanga is a very disciplined and challenging practice. It's a very Eastern practice. It's supposed to be done every day. You're supposed to do your own solo practice. It's usually a 2-hour practice. You're meant to get up at 4 a.m. practice as the sun comes up. So obviously, you practice, whatever is going to be best for you, but that was the way that Ashtanga Yoga was originally done. It's usually done in a set series. So there's the primary series, which is the first start of the series, and then it goes on. There's 4 different sets of series, and they get more advanced as your practice advances. So it can be more difficult. You use Ujjayi breath throughout your entire Ashtanga practice. It's very much focused on the breath, but it's nice because you flow through each pose, but then it's sort of like the same sort of poses, so you know what's coming next. So it's good, and it's more of an advanced practice as the poses are quite difficult. The next practice is one of my other favorites, and this is Hot Yoga. Just like Hatha, it is very broad. Hot yoga can be a vinyasa flow, it can be a hatha, you can have anything in a heated class, but typically I've found that the heated classes in Southern California and other parts of the world have been more of a vinyasa flow. It seems to be a little bit easier to not just hold the poses. When you're really holding the poses for a long period of time in a heated class, you tend to sweat a lot more and it gets very tiring. But hot yoga is great. A lot of people think that you have to be really advanced to do hot yoga, but it's actually really good for people who are just starting out their practice, so long as you go to a less advanced class, because the poses are really great for anyone who's trying to build flexibility and work through an injury. The point of the heated room is to literally warm the muscles up and release them so that you can kind of get into the poses a lot easier. So I've found, like, for example, my husband, he has really tight hamstrings and he's not very flexible, but when he goes to a heated yoga class, he can more easily get into the poses, and he likes it more because he feels he's working up more of a sweat. Obviously, you're going to sweat loads in a hot yoga class, and it's great, kind of releases any of the toxins that you might get in from your air, from your food, from a heavy weekend, whatever it may be. You can kind of release that in a heated yoga class. It's also great for injuries because it helps with the inflammation, helps really bring that down in the heated room. The next practice is Bikram yoga, and I gave Bikram yoga like a really big chance, but I have to say it's my least favorite of all the types of yoga. Bikram, it's a newer practice. It's done in a heated room. It's 90 minutes long. It's a little bit hotter than a typical hot yoga room. It's very predictable as it's the same sequence every time you do a set of 26 different postures that Bikram, which is a man, he created. So when I say created, he actually got most of all the poses are really from Hatha yoga, and he's kind of just tweaked them in a little way to be his own practice. I don't really agree with the Bikram yoga practice just because I feel that it takes away from a lot of the ancient practice that was originally there. Also, I found that when I was practicing, I gave it a month and a half, and I found that I was in pain. Walking up the stairs, I felt my knees were hurting, my back was hurting. So it may be good for certain bodies, but I know for my body, it really wasn't working for me, and I'm not a big fan of Bikram, but it could be good for you. So that's why I'm saying you need to try all these different types of yoga and really find the one that works best for you and your body and your practice. The next type of yoga is Yin yoga. So Yin yoga is very interesting. The poses are held from anywhere from like 2 to 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the teacher and the practice. And it's very slow but very challenging. It's good for injuries because you can kind of take your time getting into the poses, but at the same time, if a pose doesn't feel right, you want to kind of come off. And the best way that you can find something like that is to focus on your breath. So obviously throughout your whole practice, you are focusing on your breath, but you focus on it in the sense that if you feel like you can't breathe when you're in a pose, you're holding your breath, that's your sign to come out of it. But if it's just a challenging pose and you can breathe okay, then you continue pushing yourself. Yin yoga is a very slow practice, but it's also very challenging because you're holding the poses for so much longer. The next type of yoga that I'd like to talk about is restorative. So restorative yoga is really good for anyone who wants to practice. I like going because it kind of helps me just get centered. It's like a little hour of meditation for me. I see yoga as a moving meditation, so you're consciously moving, you're being aware of your body and your breath, and it's helping you stay more centered. So for a restorative yoga, obviously it's more relaxing, it's great for stress release, and it's more meditative. Most of the class is spent usually on the ground. It's usually candles that are lit. It's more of on stress release. So if you have you're not really that focused on the physical side, or you have an injury or whatever it is, you want to take a break, it's good to go to these restorative classes to kind of just stay grounded and stay going in your practice. Next practice is Kundalini yoga. So Kundalini yoga is a very spiritual practice. It's more centered around mantras and breath work, also known as pranayama. So Ujjayi is a type of pranayama, the breath that we were working on before. There's also Kapalbhati, or breath of fire, where you forcefully exhale, would look like this. So the exhale is coming out through the nose, and you're pumping the navel stomach. So this is helping kind of work up some of the toxins and release your body from anything that gets built up. There's a few other types of breath work that you'll use in Kundalini yoga. It's less physical and more focused on the nerve strength rather than like the muscular strength. So you'll do certain things where, either the arms are held up or whatever it may be that, isn't necessarily a challenging pose, but it becomes challenging because of the length of time that you're holding it. The next type of yoga is Iyengar, and this is a practice that any age can do. It's very detail oriented, so you'll notice that it's very focused on the anatomy as it's being taught. The teacher will usually talk about how it's affecting the body, how the pose is affecting the body, what adjustments you can do. It's usually done with lots of yoga blocks or straps and things like that can help you get into the pose more easily, lots of props, maybe a blanket, whatever it may be. Those are all a rough breakdown of all the different types of practices, and the best way that you can find out which one of these practices is best for you is obviously your intuition. You might have already heard one and thought, that one's me. Every single thing that she said was spot on for what I want for my practice. But it's very important that you go out and you try all these practices, because you never know. Really, you might have heard a million different things from different people, but you can only have your own opinion. Your practice is going to be catered to you. And me personally, I practice more of like a vinyasa or restorative or hot yoga. Those are the three that I stick with, but that doesn't mean that those are the only ones I do. Every single day is going to be different. Every week's going to be different. Sometimes I feel that I need to bring Kundalini into my practice or whatever. See, me as a yoga instructor, I teach a little bit differently. I usually don't stick to one specific style. That's why I go by the name of Yoga Savvy. I kind of try to bring in all the different types of practices that I like and have worked with my body, and kind of bring a well-rounded practice for my students. So that's kind of what I would suggest for you, is just getting out there and finding the ones that are best for you and what feels good for your body. So thank you for listening today, and I hope this helps you along your yoga journey to find the practice that is going to work best for you and your body.